If you get on the phone with a customer, the best thing that you can do is have one question prepped, just one. The only thing we need to know is
tactically, how can we go about using psychology to get attention, specifically through the design of an ad?
brands aren't going to like me for this, but please, please, please don't use your brand colors. Don't use your brand colors inside ads.
Wow, there it is, guys. You heard it here first.
I primarily use statics just because they're so incredibly powerful. If you can hit the right message on a static, you can scale an ad account using just statics. I've seen it many, many times. And some of the biggest brands that I work with, working with just statics. Oftentimes people will come back and look at my ads and they go, geez, Sarah, like your ads are very copy heavy, and that's on purpose. Mine usually have headlines, subheads, at least 2 buttons, bullet list, and a button. It looks like a Pinterest piece of content, and that's on purpose.
What makes a great performance static ad? Today, I am very excited because I have a very special guest on the channel. I have Sarah Levinger, who is a consumer insights expert, a psychology fanatic, and host of the Brain Driven Brands podcast. Sarah, thank you so much for coming on the channel today. I cannot wait to speak to you.
Thank you for having me. This is going to be so much fun. You and I have chatted for a couple years now, so every conversation we have is always interesting. So thank you. This will be fun.
It's going to be very, very fun. I mean, your content alone on Twitter, the stuff you put out on the podcast as well, I learn from every single piece of content you put out. So I can't wait to dig into some psychology and learn how we can use this as strategists in our ads.
I'm excited. We should dive in because I have so many things that I want to talk about when it comes to psychology. And I feel like this is one of those topics that's going to be pretty important for 2025 in particular, especially in the US. We're in an election year, so this is going to be an interesting one.
Yeah. Well, let's start from ground zero. In that case, I want to talk about emotion in psychology. And I will say, I like I said to you before we started recording, I listen to the podcast, I look at all of your content, and it's very easy for me to see now why the stuff that you say works. But my objection, and the objection that people may have listened to this when they've seen your content or they've read stuff about psychology in creative strategy before, is that like, yeah, this stuff looks cool, but like at the end of the day, when I sit down and I do my strategy a certain way, like I still don't really think about emotion. I still don't really, I think about ad angles first before I think about emotions, or I think about psychology. For people who have maybe seen your content and along those lines of thinking, why is it so important? And like, what does it actually look like in practice?
Yeah, this is actually a question I get a lot, so don't feel bad. Almost everybody I've ever talked to about this is like, that sounds great, Sarah. We love your content. It's interesting. It's nice to consume, but like, how are you supposed to apply it? Right? Like there's the application piece is what's missing. And I think that's why there's large scale businesses like Ogilvy, whose only job is to apply psychology to brands. If you can't afford Ogilvy, which not a lot of brands can because they're expensive and amazing and big, but that if you can't go that route of hiring someone big, the next best thing obviously is to train somebody internally or learn all this stuff on your own. So I personally believe that when it comes to marketing in particular, you can't do anything without emotion because humans are emotion. We are emotional creatures who think, not thinking creatures who emote, if that makes sense. So 100% of the time, we're just working on emotion all day long. So, and this goes down to just like how the brain works with humans. 95% of our decisions come from the subconscious brain, which is very, very old, very, very fast, records every single thing that comes into your ecosystem. And it's a very highly emotional little guy. Like he's just emoting all day long. The conscious brain is the one that everybody, specifically marketers, try to use when they're actually producing ads. And this is what I see a lot. So all that to be said, wrap it back together. If you're trying to consciously think of ad angles, of ways to frame things, of offers, of landing pages, pricing tests, all these different things, you're using the slowest form of computing power that your brain has. And that's why I usually prioritize emotions.
Got it. So let's just say that I'm sitting down to do some strategy. Like, how would you advise someone who's never done this before to approach this? Would you look at it like proactively and think like, okay, I'm doing the strategy for this brand. I'm going to produce a bunch of ads. Let me conduct research and maybe look at some of the reviews and put together some kind of like NLP report, which I've heard you speak about before. Or would you look at it reactively and look at the data from ads that we've made that have performed and go, okay, this one is this emotion and this one is this emotion. So like, what can we take from that and how can we use that going forward?
Yeah. Oh, so this is a tough one. It's one that I've been trying to figure out for the longest time, how to train people to do this, because all of my knowledge and experience is based upon the fact that I just read a crap ton of books for like 10 straight years. And I just gathered so much of this knowledge about how the brain works and how humans work that eventually I got to my own kind of strategy system where I'll start backwards basically. So most of the
Mm,
time when you're coming into marketing and you're trying to figure out what should we run, when should we run it, how should we say it type of a thing, we start from a tactical standpoint of like, what's the price in here, what's the hook look like, what is the like hold section look like what creators, what models do we want to hire. We're very tactical about it. We like to get into the chunky stuff. I like to flip it upside down and start from, how do I want this person to feel, because
mm,
that will actually what's the word, like it will inform basically all the rest of the tactical stuff. But I have to have a deep understanding of how do I want this person to feel. Now that's step one. Step two is, what do they already feel? I have to know both of those things. So I always sit down with a strategy and ask myself those two questions first. How do I want them to feel? How do they currently feel? Now, most of the time, marketers go one level deep. They think, okay, if I want to know what they already feel, I want to know what they already feel about their problem. That's a little too shallow, and so I like to go much deeper, because again, everything that we do as humans is coming into that subconscious brain. It's processing all of it out, so everything you do is connected. If you're struggling to lose weight, and as a marketer you're trying to help this person lose weight by selling them XYZ product, the worst thing that you can do is just talk about that problem, because it's much deeper emotionally, because it's connected to everything they do. So instead of
mhm,
talking about, for instance, like, you don't feel good in your jeans, you don't feel good in your clothes, that's one place in their life they don't feel good about their weight. The next place they probably don't feel good is getting into their car and having to buckle the seatbelt. That's also uncomfortable. The next place they don't feel good is probably sitting in a chair at a coffee shop. The next place they don't feel good is probably like walking with their boyfriend, right? Like there's many different places that this affects their life. So that's why I always ask those two questions. What do I want them to feel? What do they currently feel? And then I'll go as deep as I possibly can. So I'll write down every place in their life that they might not feel good about what's happening to them, because it's easier on the back end to start getting the correct creators, the right copy, the right imagery that will speak to this experience that they're having.
interesting. That's very interesting. I mean, you touched on research there. It's one of the biggest pain points in our industry. And like we always have a joke internally about like 99% of the issues that you have with your ads are because you didn't do enough research,
Yeah.
which may be
Yeah.
hyperbole, but like also maybe
It's
not.
true
Like
though.
it also may
It's
not
true.
be hyperbole. Um, Everyone's got their own process of how they go about and doing it.
Yeah.
What does the research process look like for Sarah? Where do you
Yeah.
go to, and what are you looking for? What are like? There's so much data you could get. Like, what are the like? I need to have these pieces of
Yeah.
data or information.
Oh my gosh, I was just thinking of this the other day, which is like, what pieces of data do we have to know to be able to
Mm,
convert a customer? And what pieces are just nice to know, but we think they're important? Which pieces do we have to get? And what time of the day should we get them? Like, if this person drinks coffee in the morning or forgets their coffee in the morning, will that change the data that we pull down? Like, there's just, oh, I can't get enough of like data research, because it's fascinating stuff, mostly because of this reason right here. Like, we have to know something about our customer. In marketing, we have been taught to prioritize problem solution. What's their problem? Or what do they call that? Like tools. I wish I could remember the exact phrase, like jobs to be done, right? Like, what's the job that they need completed?
yeah.
I understand that these are really easy ways for marketers to figure out what they need to know. The problem with that is sometimes with humans, what they think they need and what they actually need is not the same thing.
Hmm.
So I talk about this a lot with service providers, or specifically course creators, like info product creators. You usually have three different buckets when somebody comes into your ecosystem. One, they usually want just the information. Let me do it myself. I just want to consume it and I'll figure it out. Two, they either want like a hybrid, right? Like, I want the information, but I also want someone to kind of teach me how to do it. Or three, they just want someone to do it for them. This happens in agencies a lot too, where you'll have a brand come in the door that's like, we just want you to do the strategy work and then we're going to take it and do it all ourselves, like produce it. Or opposite side, we want someone to do all of it for us. Now, it's interesting because this is basically what you're witnessing is like human capacity for production, right? Humans have like a really weird way that they manage problems. Some of the problems in your life, you're going to want someone to do it for you. Some of the problems in your life, you're fully capable and you could do it yourself. So all this kind of wraps back around into when it comes to like which data pieces do you need? We got to figure out which problems people have and how they want to solve it is probably the most important piece that everybody's missing, because that will inform what pieces of data you need. So a woman who's trying to lose weight, that's her problem. How does she want to solve it? Is she an active person? Then we need data on is she working out currently? Does she not know how to work out? Like how you just it's so weird when you start going down into like what pieces of data do you need? Because you really have to figure out how she wants to solve her problem first. And then you can go get the data you need.
I mean, yeah, there's so much to unpack there.
Yeah.
We can talk tech stack, like exactly what, like where you'd go to find a piece of data like that for that woman. I feel like I was watching your Emotion talk recently, and you use some tools that I haven't seen banded around that often, something a little unconventional, which I found very interesting. We're very heavy Adcrate on organic research, so doing a lot on TikTok, on Instagram Reels, and then searching the web for like Reddit forums, Quora articles, and trying to really get in the head of our customer and talk about and find out how they talk about the problems or solutions that they're trying to achieve, so that we can include that back in our messaging. Use a couple of tools that I haven't seen talked about too much. So what are the most important tools for you when you're doing this research, and how do you use them?
Yeah. So when I'm looking for like behavioral data, the best place you can go is to your customer. You need to get on a phone with a customer. Now, if you get on a phone with a customer, the best thing that you can do is have one question prepped, just one. Don't ask them 17. We don't need to know about their process or what they thought about the product or what they think about the brand. The only thing we need to know is what was the story, right? Like explain to us how you even got to us, and then just leave it open-ended. So if you have access to a customer, that's number one, the best place to go, I would say, is just let them talk for like an hour about their life, about their kids, about how they figured things out, those type of things. If you cannot get access to a customer, I usually use the psychographic research panel to try and figure out I go wide, industry, all the way down to like individual. So I usually start with Google Trends, mostly because you can find out some really strange trends that are correlated. So for instance, in the motion presentation, I had saw a correlation between bath bombs and self-care. So if you watch the actual data trend, right, on Google Trends, you can see they're super well aligned. So self-care and bath bombs go incredibly hand in hand. So finding those emotional crossroads on Google Trends is one of the best ways to figure out emotionally where people sit. And obviously you can break this down by country and all kinds of different things. So I'll go into Google Trends and just start typing like, okay, we are trying to sell bath bombs. Let's try self-care. Let's try self-care Sunday. Let's try like Boss Babe. Let's try, all these different emotional things that might be correlated to that particular product. That's going to tell me specifically how the industry is doing and what the industry is feeling emotionally. After that, I'll go over to Google Keywords. And this is primarily to try and figure out, by volume at least, how many high intent purchasers I have. Mostly because that's going to tell me how hard this product is going to be to market. Because a lot of times the brands don't understand how interesting or how like viable their own products are. So for the founders, I'll go through and do a lot of keyword research on like how many people are searching for this every single month, and do we need to change what we say? So again, in the motion presentation, I had a client that actually came in that was using this term nootropic, like nootropic coffee. And they were like, we just can't get our ads to hit. We just know, they're so expensive, like CPM, like the whole thing is just through the freaking roof and we can't figure out why. And they're like, obviously the industry is booming. We should be crushing with this. And I was like, all right, well, let's do the research. So I went and checked out this keyword, found out very quickly that nobody's using the term nootropic. Like no customer on the planet was typing a nootropic coffee into Google, which is one of the highest intent places you can go. As soon as you get to Google or Amazon, you're already in purchasing phase. So we switched their ads from nootropic over into mushroom coffee, which was such a much more layman's term. And their ads started to work like overnight. Just doesn't take much. So anyway, Google Trends, really good for industry research. Google Keywords is understanding like how many high intent purchasers do I have. And then from there, I usually go to answer the public because I'm trying to figure out how educated this customer is. So again, this is all kind of behavioral data that I'm trying to get, a little bit of emotional, but behavioral data. Answer the public is so amazing for just analyzing the words that people say, because they just give you a whole roster of a bunch of keywords that people are currently searching for. So I'll go through there and basically check to see if there's high educated words Like if you see something in there that's like a friggin' doctor term that only a doctor would know, high educated customer. If you start seeing a bunch of words like how does this work? What's in it? Does this work for XYZ problem? Low educated customers, which means I'm probably going to have to do a little bit more work on educating in the ad, which is fine with me. It just gives me more information on what I need to do. So those are like the first three. Then I have several more that I'm trying to figure out again. Like we're just trying to figure out what's the state of the person that we're going after. So industry data, understanding how many high intent purchases you have, and then you're going to understand the education level of the person. Last one I usually go to is Pinterest trends. And this one in particular, I'm trying to figure out what people are clicking on. At least in the US, women hold about 80, well, they say about like 60 to 80% of the purchasing power in the US, which usually is like they influence a lot of purchases because they're either the primary purchaser in the home or they just influence the people around them. And obviously Pinterest is primarily women. It's becoming more split as we go along, but for the most part, Pinterest is a really good place to go and see what people are clicking on content wise. There's a lot of posts about education focused stuff, specifically for like makeup or beauty. If I see a bunch of tutorials on Pinterest, I'm going to test tutorials in the ad account because strategy wise, people are already clicking on it on a sister platform. So we might as well test tutorials. So that's kind of like a snapshot of it. I have a much bigger panel that I run that has all kinds of different places I go check, but that's like a snippet of it.
Yeah, so good. And what you find, like as you spoke about on this channel before, guys, like doing the research properly, like it's not fun. It's the boring, unsexy work, but like you do a good job of this, and your ad scripts, like they literally write themselves because you've got all of the information and all the data, and you've got the way that in which our customers are communicating, like the actual words that they're saying when they're speaking to their friends or when they're searching for this solution, rather than just what we as marketers think they're doing or saying. I think that Answer the Public is a great shout that kind of we have started using a lot more recently. I think that in many cases, and we've had many client accounts where this has been the situation, like people are not necessarily making bad ads, they're just not meeting their customers at where they're at. And being able to do something like that on Answer the Public, like for example, we work with a bidet brand, and when we came in, their ads that they were making were decent ads. It's just that they were making ads under the assumption that everyone knew what a bidet was. They made ads under the assumption that people were product and solution aware. And had they been like as per breakthrough advertising, I feel the ads would have done pretty well. We came in and realized that most of America actually doesn't know what a bidet is. So we said, okay, that's cool. Like makes our job slightly harder, but like now we're going to make ads. Firstly, selling people on why a bidet, and then why this company. It's just meeting people where they're at. And obviously not everyone in your, all of your prospects are not going to be at the same awareness level, but thinking about where the majority of your audience are at and how can you meet them there and guide them through that process.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I'm weird because I like the research, so I just get deep into the research every day. But and this goes down to a little bit of methodology as a marketer and as like anybody that's producing ads. I would so much rather front load the work. Like I get lazy towards production because I'm tired and because this is a lot of work to produce ads at this scale, at this level. I don't like the volume game as much just because, I caveat that. I'm okay with volume as long as you know what you're trying to say, as long as you've hit a message that you know is going to work in perpetuity, right? Which is very difficult to do if you don't have research. So I start off with precision and then build volume into the ad account as soon as we know exactly what hits with our customers. But yes, I mean, at the end of the day, this just comes down to like, do you want to front load the work so you don't have to do as much when it comes to production? Or do you want to just produce a crap ton of ads and hope that they hit?
And it's soul destroying. Like when you're in that cycle and you're putting out volume, then you're literally at the point where you can't do anything else. Like, what can I do to put out more ads? Sometimes the answer is just a step back. And we had a big breakthrough at Adcrate when we forced our strategists to put time in their calendar for research. Not just like research and doing this upfront, which is what everyone, like you come onto a new account or a new brand that you're working with and you front load a load of research. That's great. Like we should be doing that, but also doing it ongoing. Like there's always going to be more ad comments. There's always going to be more reviews. There's always going to be more organic posts on the internet that we can look at and take the pulse for our customer base or our prospective customer base to see how they think is changing over time.
Yeah, 100%. Well, and that's just it in this industry in particular. There's always going to be more data. And that goes back to the original point, which is like which pieces of data are important and which are not. I personally believe a lot of the data that we collect is irrelevant. It's just irrelevant data. We just have it because it's fun to have data. Yeah, the core pieces, again, how do they feel? What do you want them to feel? Because that changes the entirety of the strategy. So,
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. Sarah, to switch gears, at least in my conversations from you and my observation of your content online, you seem like a pretty proficient ChatGPT user. I
yeah,
may be
yeah.
wrong. Um, so much
Let me
of
dig
so
that up.
much of AI in general is about asking the right questions.
Yes. Yeah.
How do you use GPT or other AI tools for that matter in your workflow, and what are the questions that you're asking to
Yeah.
really get those golden nuggets that we're after?
Oh my gosh. I could talk about ChatGPT all day.
Please do.
Chat and I are buds. Chat and I are friends.
I can imagine.
I can't get enough of it, mostly because again, it helps me think. And the human brain is very strange. It does not think well by itself. Like being able to connect to some other thinking entity is how we learn to survive in life. So, biologically speaking, humans are made to process information and to become innovative, to be creative with other brains in the room, which is difficult because often in this industry, you're working alone, especially the strategists. Like they don't usually spend a lot of time with other strategists. They're usually in front of their computer doing the research, like figuring things out. But if you have a team, I would highly, highly suggest that you get at least one call a week that's an hour long. That's just for like shooting the shit, like brainstorming. We need a whole team to come together and say, okay, let's dump. And I think you and I did this actually with Ali at the very beginning when we were doing Creator House, right? We had like one session where all three of us just sat in a room and just dumped out as many ideas as we could. And there was
Yep.
some amazing ideas that came out of it that
Really
got
good one.
executed into the ad account and actually performed incredibly well, just based on the fact that there were three brains in the room to process it. So I use chat as an extra brain because it's just Sarah in her weird office, just like doing nothing. So there's nobody here for me to like brainstorm with. So I'll go into chat and first thing I usually ask chat is like, can you help me think? This is a weird prompt, but it helps the LLM figure out exactly what you want it to do. If you ask the LLM, can you help me think about XYZ problem? This is going to sound weird, but like LLMs are built to hallucinate. They're supposed to be creative, right? Hallucinate, creative, same thing. So
I
they're,
love that so much.
yeah,
I love that you asked that as the first question that you go into GPT.
help me think.
As I really don't mean to interrupt, but just because I know there's so
Yeah.
much more that you're going to go into here, and I'm really excited for it. But like as an extension of that, what a prompt that I've been using a lot recently, I actually use a plugin called Text Expander. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I have underneath every single prompt that I use, I paste the sentence before answering this question. Tell me if there's any other information that you need to know to
Yes.
give me a better answer to this question. Because
Yes.
that's the thing. You're right about LLMs.
Yep.
Like it doesn't know what it needs to know to
Yeah.
give you the optimal answer. It's just
Yeah.
responding to the request that you've given it.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
in many cases, I just have a text expander prompt. So I just have a shortcut on my keyboard. I just paste that in there every
Yeah.
single prompt. And often it'll give me one or two more questions that, yes, I have to go and answer. That takes
Yeah.
me 30 extra seconds. But the
Yep.
output that I get from that, because it has
So
all the
much better.
context, it knows what it needs to know,
Mhm. Yeah.
far outweighs the time that it takes. So I didn't mean to interrupt you,
Yes.
but like, I thought that was a really good point you made.
Yeah, yeah. Well, again, you're trying to get this thing to do your thinking for you. That's what chat is built to do. That's what it's really, really good at. So I don't like when you go on and do chat prompts and things, you don't want to like cut the legs off this chat like immediately just by not giving it enough information. But to your point, sometimes humans forget that we know a lot. Like we have all this information in here and chat does not. Like chat has a crap ton of data that it's processed, but it doesn't know what you're currently trying to do. So I think context is important. Sometimes I will test though, giving it vague, like just give me something like this and see what comes out of it. Mostly because sometimes you'll get some really weird answers if you just let the chat decide what's best for you. And they just did an update on chat recently. I can't remember when it was, last month sometime, where they changed how it actually processes the information. So they used to have it where chat would basically go read your prompt and then spit out answers that it thought you would were like most likely to want. So it would like guess basically. Now they have it where chat will read the prompt, but it will basically give you answers based upon what it thinks is best instead of what it thinks you want. So it's like kind of leveling up a little bit where it's starting to kind of think on its own, sort of. So if you've seen a change in like the prompts that or the responses that get returned, that's why. It's because they just did an update. Anyway, so prompt wise though, I usually have like a whole bunch. I've actually written about this, I think, on Twitter. That are my headline prompts, specific to the actual emotions that come out of Marketing to Mind States, because I love that book and I can't get enough of it. So those prompts are on Twitter if you want to find them. But primarily, I actually just sit there and talk to chat. That sounds weird, but I don't prompt when I do chat things. I'll just have a conversation. And I think the only other person I've seen do this is Gold. I don't know if you know Gold on Twitter. That guy is like a killer in the AI space. Oh, I'm going to send you his profile. He's amazing. Gold works with prompts way more than I do. The guy is a freaking expert at chat, and he does the same kind of thing. He'll just sit there and talk and talk and talk. Similar to what you were talking about, like, is there anything else you need to know to be able to do this for me? I've taken some of his, I don't know, like his work and applied it where I'll sit and talk to chat about, this is the person that I'm marketing to, give demographics, age, like gender, those type of things. And then at the end, I will say, can you explain to me emotionally how this person probably feels about their problem? And then it'll just spit out like a huge piece of text. And then I'll ask more questions of like, is there any other place in life that they're currently experiencing this? Am I missing something about what they believe? This has actually helped too when I started to digest like generational preferences. So I'll ask chat, based on the fact that this person is a millennial, what do they believe about life that I need to know to be able to market well to them? And it'll give you an entire essay on that. So chatting with chat is probably the best way to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice. I get a lot of people asking me or in the comments saying like, what's the perfect prompt? Like almost expecting me to come up with this prompt that's suddenly going to help us make great ads. And it's not the case. I mean, you're right. It's less about thinking of what the perfect prompt is and more about having a conversation. Like you don't know what the perfect prompt is until you've got there. And you can get there by saying like, make this shorter, or like come up with ideas for different emotion, or like, can you expand on this give me 5 different ideas about point B or something like that. And then you get to what is the answer, or like consider the best answer, but you wouldn't have been able to think of that in the first place with the perfect prompt because you didn't have that feedback from AI. I'd be curious to get your take on this. For me, like when I do have prompts, I do have a prompt library of go-tos that I do use when I just want to like do some strategy. And again, going back to the idea of like not having the like perfect prompt, but I don't do anything on GPT that I wouldn't do manually. Like when I started using GPT, I literally just listed every single part of my research process on a document. And then I went part by part, line by line, and go, how could this possibly be turned into a GPT prompt? And what you'll find is that the vast majority of research is just collating data and insights. And if that's the case, then like we can pretty much turn most of it into GPT prompts, or at least helped with GPT prompts. So if there is anyone here that's sitting thinking about like, I don't know where to start, like I don't know what prompts, don't try and do anything different. I mean, if you see prompts online and you like them, great, like add them to your library, but also just think about like what things you do manually. We talk about on this channel, the static testimonial prompt that I have, the one-liners, like look through these reviews and come up with some realistic, authentic one-liners that our customers would say. I only thought of that because that's why if I didn't have ChatGPT, I would go through each review manually and look for like actual one-liners that we can use in ads.
Oh my gosh.
So you're thinking about what we do manually and how we can turn that into prompts. And at the end of the day, it is a muscle. Like I use chat like multiple times a day. Like if we're going to Vienna for a team retreat in December, and it came up the itinerary. Or if I have a spreadsheet, it's so good. Spreadsheet, just put it in, give me the formula, and it's done. Like it's just a habit. You build the muscle. And then you're good to go.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting when you start talking to chat because you'll start to notice some of your own biases, right? Because chat will kind of push back a little bit sometimes, especially if I'm trying to create like a really in-depth, thorough strategy for somebody. Again, asking that question of like, what am I missing? What am I missing? What am I missing? You'll get all these different answers that chat is like, you're missing like 5 of very important things. And I'm like, oh, crap. You're right, chat. Thank you for reminding me of that. So yes. Talk with chat, don't necessarily prompt. I think it's really important to shift your mindset away from like chat as a tool. Chat is literally just another person to help you think better. It's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I want to talk statics with you briefly, Sarah. I would be remiss if I didn't talk statics with you at some point today. You see like so many ads being posted online, and
Yeah.
like I mean, we've actually had a joke before that like where we've said that like all the ads that get the love online, ironically, don't tend to perform the ad account. We are,
Yep.
in many cases, as marketers, we have a bias towards like things that look great, but we don't want our customers to say like, "Wow, this is a great ad." We want our
Yeah.
customers to say, "Where can I buy this?"
Yes.
So when you think about statics specifically, what makes a great performance static ad?
Statics are just so near and dear to my heart. Um, I personally think statics are completely underutilized. They're like a kind of an underdog in the industry. People will kind of test them at certain times of the year, and then they'll ditch them for video after a while. They'll come back and try them again, and then they'll ditch them for video again. I primarily use statics. I don't produce any video currently, just because they're so incredibly powerful. If you can hit the right message on a static, you can scale an ad account using just statics. I've seen it many, many times. And some of the biggest brands that I work with, working with just statics. So in general, there's a lot of psychology that goes around these, mostly because I think as marketers tend to forget that like our content is not going into like a void, right? Like you're loading this into some sort of a platform that has crap tons of organic content competing with your ad. I hear a lot of brand founders and marketers say that like we're competing with our competitors. We got to make better ads than them. Technically, you're only barely competing with your competitors from an ad standpoint. You're competing with the organic content is what you're competing with. Somebody wants to watch a chicken video much more than your ad. So you got to you got to think about where this is going. So this is the reason why I love statics, especially on obviously like Meta Instagram. Um, Mostly because you can control the psychology in it a lot better than you can in a video. I still love video. I think we should still use video, but again, only after you validated the message inside a static first because it's just dirt cheap to run. In videos, we can't control psychologically what's making people purchase. It could literally be this plant that gets people to purchase. We have no way of knowing whether that was it or not, because the brain just makes associations and jumps to conclusions, and we don't have control over that. But in a static, I can connect whatever this person's feeling currently to whatever I want them to feel, like we talked about before. So copy, obviously incredibly important, but it's actually secondary to image. So when it comes to creating like a psychology based and focused static, images usually get processed by the brain about 60,000 times faster than text does. So the imagery is what gets people to stop. So whatever you want them to feel, you better put that feeling in the image, not the copy. Obviously, you need it in both, but like first thing you should prioritize emotional imagery. Once you have that and they've stopped on the image because they like whatever the image says to them, then you can actually back up the message with the copy itself. And usually I prioritize humorous copy over anything else. Mostly because Sarah just likes to laugh, but also because humor hits a spot in the brain that just like is so incredibly satisfying. And every human on the planet understands humor, every single one. It's very difficult sometimes when you write copy to a low educated or a high educated customer. Sometimes it won't hit as well if you're trying to be clever, right? But humor is universal. Anybody on the planet has like a humor bone that you could possibly hit just by being a little funny, a little cheeky. So prioritize that emotional image, generate some sort of copy that backs up whatever the image is trying to say emotionally, and try and use humor when you can because it just works incredibly well. There's a lot of like tactical stuff that we could talk about, like how to lay things out so the brain can process it easier. That's important too, but it's not as integral as those two pieces.
That's a really interesting way of thinking about it, and actually different to the way I was going to take it. So I'd be really curious to get your perspective. I personally think that a lot of the problem that strategists have with statics is that they make them, they almost like they go design first, but they go from it from a perspective of like, hey, here's an ad I've seen on Foreplay, or hey, here's an ad I've
Yeah.
seen in ad library. I'm just going to copy it and I'm going to shoehorn a message into it, which is why like I
Yeah.
try and like we try and push message first,
Yeah.
but I guess it's like a initial design first, then message, and then
Yeah.
like the rest. Yeah. How do you think about what people should be prioritized in statics. And as a
Yeah.
follow-up, like you've seen many cases of static scan accounts. That isn't the case for most brands.
Yeah.
Why is that? What mistakes are people making?
I think it's because they run statics that don't have a congruent message. Their ad image and the copy fight against each other. And so the brain is processing this at like 11 million bits per second. The subconscious is just scrolling past these images as fast as they possibly can because these people are just, again, once you get into a platform, consumers are doing two things. They want entertainment or they want to escape. That's the only two things they're doing at that moment in time when they're actually using any sort of social media platforms. So if you're wanting entertainment or you want to escape from something, stopping on an ad is not in your like wheel. Like you don't really look for ads unless it's funny or relatable, shareable, entertaining. So in general, I think statics don't get prioritized because people assume that they're more ad-like than a video, which I disagree. I think videos are currently way more ad-like than a static is because people aren't really looking for statics as an ad format, I guess you could say. So I think that's probably why is people are looking at statics as it's just a picture. It's a lot like Pinterest. It's just content.
That's why you got to go there for the research. That's the value in the Pinterest, guys. Tying it all back together. There you go. There you go. Before we move on, just to get a little bit more tactical about design, I'd love to hear the way you think about it. Like tactically, how can we go about using psychology to get attention specifically through the design of an ad?
Yeah. Brands aren't going to like me for this, but please, please, please don't use your brand colors. Don't use your brand colors inside ads.
Oh, there it is, guys. You heard it here first.
Especially if your brand is blue or white. Please don't use that on Meta. The entirety of Meta is blue and white. You have to stand out. You have to be able to capture attention very quickly because like we just talked about, people are scrolling. They're just going as fast as they possibly can. Pink, actually, for some reason, and this is anecdotal, I'd have to see if there's some studies on this, but a pink color does incredibly well on Facebook. And it doesn't matter what brand I've run a pink background for, every single one in every single industry I've ever ran, the ad does well. Pink for some reason. I think just psychologically, it stands out.
It does.
It's just odd.
There's also not much just pink on the feed.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's just not a lot of pink.
Maybe it's just my feed.
There's just not a lot of pink. So again, when it comes to color choice, color selection for designs, make sure you're choosing a color that's going to get attention and generate an ad that is going to, going to be psychologically satisfying for the brain. So oftentimes people will come back and look at my ads and they go, geez, Sarah, like your ads are very copy heavy. And that's on purpose. I do that for a reason because I'm trying to get people to stop and look at it. Most of the ads that I see nowadays that are statics often have one tiny little headline and possibly like 5 stars and a quote and nothing else. Mine usually have headlines, subheads, at least 2 buttons, bullet list, and a button. There's a lot of stuff in that. But it's because I want people to stop. It looks like a Pinterest piece of content, and that's on purpose. So when you're prioritizing color, make sure it's something that's going to stand out on the feed. Secondary to that, make sure it's very psychologically easy to digest, right? Or something that's going to stop the brain a little bit. You either go copy heavy or go extremely copy light. Don't go copy mid, if that makes sense. Mostly because every other static looks exactly like that. So make sure that you're standing out. There's a lot of studies that we could go into that talk about white space and the use of fonts and the use of different like logos for conversion rates and all kinds of different things. I don't necessarily think you have to use those tactics. Primarily, this comes down to color and how easy it is to process psychologically.
Wow. Okay. Thank you so much, Sarah, for coming on. That was incredible. You are a fountain of knowledge for us marketers. Really was great chatting. Sarah, tell the people where they can find you.
I am basically everywhere you consume content now. It's taken me forever, but I'm everywhere. I'm everywhere now. At Sarah Levinger, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube. The only place I'm not at Sarah Levinger is Instagram because I can't get the at Sarah Levinger handle, which is unfortunate. But anyways, over there I'm at Sarah.Levinger, I think. Everywhere else at Sarah Levinger. And I'm currently like about to launch a new site, so that'll be interesting to see where that goes. But right now you can follow me at sarahlevinger.co. I have all of my previous newsletters that are loaded over there. If you guys want to learn more about just how other brands in the industry are using psychology, go binge a bunch of that stuff, because that I can't get enough like studying how the big brands are using psychology. Yeah, it's pretty powerful. So that's where you can find me.
Please do. There is so much value in the stuff that Sarah puts out. And like I said, it did take me some time to understand like how to apply this in my workflow. But once I did, it made it so much more useful. And now I look at marketing like from a different perspective. So please do go and follow Sarah and the stuff that she does. Thank you once again, Sarah, for coming on. Thank you guys for watching. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one.